with another sew along. Today we're going to be working on my new fall pattern, pattern 8222, and we're going to be making view A, the bomber jacket. Now if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, make sure and follow the link in the description box below for the Sewing Basics video. In that video, I talk about how to read a pattern, how to cut out your size, how to cut out the tissue, the fabric, and read all of the printed instructions that are on your tissue paper. After you're done with that video, then come back and sew along with me. Make sure to check the back of the envelope where you have all of your fabric options and suggestions along with any notions that you're going to need for this pattern. Let's go over all of the cut pattern pieces that you need to make this bomber jacket. Okay, you're going to need to cut out pattern piece number 1, which is the front of our bomber jacket. You're going to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of lining, and if you plan on quilting this, 2 of padding. Now, I'm not going to be quilting this for the tutorial, but if you do want to quilt it, follow the instructions for jacket A, steps 1, 2, 3, where it tells you exactly what to do. Then you're going to need to cut out pattern piece number 2, which is our flap, and you're going to be cutting out 4 of these of fabric and 2 of interfacing. Then you're going to cut out pattern piece number 3, which is the back of our jacket. This is cut on the fold. You're going to cut 1 out of fabric, 1 out of lining, and 1 out of padding if, again, you are going to be quilting your jacket. Then you're going to cut out pattern piece number 4, which is the tab, the back of our jacket tab, and you're going to cut 1 out of fabric and 1 out of interfacing. Then you're going to cut out pattern piece number 5, which is our pocket, and you're going to cut 4 out of these. Next, you're going to cut pattern piece number 6, which is our sleeve, and you're going to cut 2 of fabric, 2 of lining, and again, if you're quilting it, 2 of padding. Next, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 7, which is our sleeve band, and you're going to be cutting out 2. Then you're going to cut out pattern piece number 8, which is our neckband, and you're going to cut 1 on the fold of your fabric. And lastly, you're going to cut pattern piece number 9, which is our lower band, and you're also going to cut this on the fold. Okay, we're going to start with our tabs. You should have 4 of these. 2 are interfaced and 2 are not interfaced. I want you to grab 1 interfaced one, 1 non-interfaced one, and with right sides facing each other, we're going to pin once along each side, and then maybe once in the middle here. And you're going to pin both the same way. When we get to the sewing machine, we're going to use 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to stitch down the short ends, and then also across the bottom, we're going to leave the top open. Then I want you to grab your back tab, and we're going to fold it with right sides facing each other. I want you to pin the sides. And then pin the bottom. We're going to leave about a 2-inch opening right in the middle here, so we can turn this right side out when we're done sewing with it. And we're also going to take this to the machine, and also using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch down both ends, short ends, and then across the bottom, except during this little 2-inch opening, which we're going to leave so we can turn this right side out. Okay, we're going to start by sewing our tabs. So we're going to be using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I want you to back stitch at the beginning. Pivot. You're going to sew both tabs the same way. Then go ahead and grab the back tab, and starting on one short end, and again using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch. Pivot. Move over about 2 inches, back stitch, Okay, go ahead and clip your corners. And then you can turn this right side out. Make sure to point or push out your corners. And then give it a nice press so it lays nice and flat. And then grab your back tab and also clip your corners. And then just go ahead and turn it right side out. And then if you have a point turner or your scissors, just make sure not to pierce your fabric. Go ahead and push your corners out. And then give this one really good press, and I want you to go ahead and slip stitch this closed. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stitch our flap, pocket flap down, back stitch, and then you're going to turn it over and you're going to stitch it down using a 1/4 inch. Then you can place your button right in the center. When you decide what buttons you want to use, you're going to do the same thing to the other flap. Okay, we're going to go ahead and place our flaps onto our front. So you should have 2 dots, 2 markings that you placed onto the front of your bomber jacket. And what we're going to do is we're going to place our flap at those 2 dots, and I'm going to pin it in place. And I'm going to place both of these on both sides. So go ahead and do the same thing we did to this side to the other side. We're going to take it to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch 3/8 of an inch away from the edge of our flap. Okay, now on the back of our bomber jacket, you should also have 2 dots. That's where your back tab is going to go. So I want you to go ahead and center that tab, and then you're going to stitch it down using buttons. So choose whatever buttons you're going to use, and then you're going to stitch them down to hold your tab in place. Okay, I want you to go ahead and grab your pockets, and we're going to go ahead and place them at both sides of the back and then both sides of the front. You should have 2 dots and a notch, and that notch should match up with the notch that is on your pocket. So I want you to go ahead and pin at the notch and also at the dots. Then you're going to grab your front pieces and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to align your pockets, right sides facing, making sure that your notches are aligned. You're going to pin there and then pin again at both dots that you should have marked. You're going to do the other front the same way. I want you to grab both fronts and your back, and we're going to stitch our pockets down using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now starting at the bottom and using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch our pockets down to our fronts and our back. You're going to stitch down the remaining 3 pockets the same way. Okay, now before we sew our side seams and our pockets, we're going to sew together our shoulders, and we're going to attach our sleeve using the flat method. So what I want you to do is place your front on top of your back, right side facing, and I want you to pin the shoulder. And you're going to do that for both shoulders, and we're going to stitch them down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch across our shoulder. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end. You're going to do both shoulders the same way. Okay, Okay, once we have our shoulders sewn together, we're going to go ahead and attach our sleeve. So this is the front and this is the back. So what I want you to do is, with right sides facing each other, I want you to lay your sleeve over the top of your jacket, and we're going to pin at our notches first. So I have a dot for the center at the shoulder line, and then I have a dot. So I'm going to match dot to dot, and then I'm going to match notch to notch. So you should have a single notch for the front, a double notch for the back, and then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. You're going to match dot to dot, single or double notch to double notch, or single notch. And then we're going to stitch this together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to pin both sleeves the same way. Okay, starting at one end, you're going to back stitch, and we're using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And if you have a lot that you need to ease in, go ahead and snip into the jacket, not the sleeve. And as you can see, it'll open up to give you some space. You're going to sew the other sleeve the same way. Okay, once you have both of your sleeves sewn in, what we're going to do is we're going to pin the entire side seam, and then we're going to pin the entire sleeve. So I want you to grab your pins, and starting at the sleeve, we're just going to fold, of course, right sides facing, and we're going to pin along the sleeve. I want you to match your underarm seams, and I want you to pin, and then continue pinning along the side. And then you're going to pin your pocket, and you should have 2 notches on your pocket, so make sure that those are aligned, and then go ahead and pin there, and then pin at the bottom. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch from the bottom up to that first dot, and then we're going to stop and back stitch, and then we're going to move up to this next dot, and we're going to back stitch, and then we're going to sew one continuous seam along the side seam, through the underarm, and along the sleeve. Then we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance from the dot around the pocket and across the bottom. We're going to do that to both sides, so pin them exactly the same. Okay, we're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to back stitch. We're going to stop at that first dot and back stitch. And then I want you to move up until you reach the next dot. Back stitch. Okay, now we're going to sew our pocket. I want you to go ahead and back stitch, and then sew around your pocket and across the bottom. Now I want you to go ahead and lay your pocket over the front side, not the back. So make sure it's facing the front, it's laying nice and flat, and we're going to stitch the pocket down to our front along the bottom. You're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, now I want you to grab your lower band, and what we're going to do is we're going to pin it along the edge. And we're going to pin all the way around. Right sides are facing each other. And make sure to align your notches. And you're going to be pulling because the band is smaller than the jacket. Aligning those notches is going to help you keep that band distributed evenly. So as we sew, we're going to be pulling. Now we're going to stitch this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, we're going to back stitch at the beginning. And then we're going to pull as we sew so that the band fits onto the jacket. I want you to go ahead and separate your zipper. And you're going to place it facing down so that your zipper pull is facing down. Your zipper teeth are facing down. I want you to go ahead and align it. And we're going to pin it in place. I'm placing my zipper tape about 1/4 inch away from the raw edge, and I'm going to pin. You're going to pin the other side of the zipper the same way. And then we're going to stitch it very close to the zipper teeth. Okay, using your zipper foot, back stitch at the beginning. And you're going to stitch pretty close to your zipper teeth. Stitch down the other side of the zipper the same way. Okay, now we're going to take our neckband and we're going to fold it right sides facing, and we're going to stitch just along the short ends using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to leave the bottom open, and then we're going to attach this to our neckline. Okay, once you've sewn your sides down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, go ahead and turn it right side out and give it a good press so it's nice and flat, and then we're going to pin it to our neckline. So grab your pins, and with right sides facing each other, we're going to first line up our dot to our shoulder, and then you should have 2 notches that match up to the back, so you want to pin there. And remember, you're going to be doing the same thing you did for the band at the bottom. You're going to be stretching to get that to fit. And now we're going to stitch all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to start at the center back, and I'm going to work my way to the front, and then I'm going to start again at the center back and work my way the other way. So I'm going to back stitch, and I'm going to pull as I'm sewing. And now I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, so now I want you to go ahead and sew your lining the same way we did our jacket. So you're going to sew your front to back at the shoulder. You're going to attach the sleeve the same way that we did for the jacket, and then you're going to sew in one continuous seam, since you don't have pockets on your lining, from the bottom up to the arm and then across your sleeve. Once you have your lining completely done, we're going to go ahead and attach it by pinning it to our jacket. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pin our lining to the bottom of our band. So what we're going to do is, I want you to take your lining and right side's facing. So the right side of your lining is facing the right side of your band. And I want you to go ahead and pin at your notch. You should also have notches. And you're going to pin it and attach this the same way that you did for the jacket. You're going to stretch and pull as you're sewing. Once you've done that, we can continue pinning and sewing the rest of our lining. Okay, so now it should look like this. It's attached at both ends. And now what I want you to do is I want you to continue pinning. So you're going to pull this up and you're going to match your neckband, right? So you're going to pin along the front and along your neckline. And then with your neckband to the inside, you're going to line up your shoulder seams. And then you're going to continue pinning along the rest of the neckline and then down the front. And now starting at one end, we're going to stitch all the way up the top and then across the neckline and all the way down. Back stitch at the beginning. And feel for the zipper teeth as you're sewing so that your needle doesn't hit them. Pivot. Continue sewing all the way around. Now using that 5-inch opening that we left in our lining, you can go ahead and pull your jacket all the way out. You can put your sleeve inside your jacket sleeve. And now you have a fully lined jacket with clean, nice finishes. And all we need to do is attach our sleeve band to our sleeves. Okay, now we're going to stitch our sleeve bands together. So I want you to fold them in half with right sides facing. Align your notch and pin. And we're going to stitch along this end here using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch this together. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end. You're going to do both sleeve bands the same way. Okay, once you have them sewn, go ahead and fold them in half like this. And I have both my lining and my sleeve lined up, so I'm making sure that my underarm seams are matching up. And then I'm going to go ahead and place my cuff here that I've created, my band, inside. And I'm going to line up all 3 underarm seams. And then you should have a notch on your band, on your sleeve, and also on your lining. So you're going to align all of those. I'm going to pin there. And just like the neckband and the lower band, we're going to pull and stitch. So if it's easier for you to pin maybe a couple more times to keep all those layers together, go ahead. And now we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Now starting at the underarm seam and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch all the way around. Remember to stretch as you're sewing. You're going to pin and stitch the other sleeve band onto your sleeve the same way, and you are all done. Well, that's all there is to it. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Until next time, peace.